Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss The Kitchen, starring Melissa McCarthy, Tiffany Haddish, Elizabeth Moss, Domhnall Gleeson, James Badge Dale, Brian Diarcy James, Jeremy Bobb, Bill Camp, and Common, and directed by Andrea Berloff. Now, before I get into this movie, I have to confess a few things. One, I am not, I repeat, not a fan of Melissa McCarthy. I liked her in a few things, like but I seriously jumped off the train with this movie. With a couple of exceptions of things that I got dragged into, and I wasn't very proud of it either. And I will confess, I didn't like either one. And now I'm seeing her again in this movie and the remake of Ghostbusters when that comes out next year. Not the sequel, but a whole nother reboot. But that's my train on Melissa McCarthy. Two, I don't like Tiffany Haddish either, despite I've seen her in these movies and reviewed her before. And I'll see her again sooner than I might expect in... And she, like McCarthy, is very annoying and very one note. As for Elizabeth Moss, I don't watch that show that she won awards for. But spoiler alert for Halloween, I will review her again in this movie. And honestly, I don't know what to think of her in general other than when I get to Us and now this movie. I'm kind of in the mix with her so far. But let's get into the movie. In Hell's Kitchen 1978, we start the movie off with Kathy Brennan, played by Melissa McCarthy, with her husband Jimmy, played by Brian Diarcy James? Yeah, that's right. Who seems like a good and protective husband and to his wife and kids. Claire Walsh, played by Elizabeth Moss, and her abusive husband Rob, played by Jeremy Bobb, who slaps her around for no good reason whatsoever. And the one who's with the husband who's the kingpin of Hell's Kitchen, Ruby O'Carroll, played by Tiffany Haddish, and her husband Kevin, played by James Badge Dale, who married Ruby, and her mother-in-law Helen, who's the biggest bitch to Ruby throughout this movie. And the husbands rob a liquor store and get arrested and put away by a detective Gary Silvers, played by Common. And honestly, I don't like any of these fucking characters because they're all despicable in their own way. Jimmy, Rob, and Kevin get sentenced to prison, and Helen with Kevin's gangsters celebrate the fact that they have parole and give the wives money, but very little money, and they try to get jobs, and the problem is their husbands are criminals, so nobody will hire them. And they think they get the idea to steal from Lil Jackie and his gang, and this plot is piss poor. And Little Jackie is definitely piss poor too. My question is, how the fuck did they know each other? And Kathy's parents are very cold characters in general. And this movie is very cold. They confront Little Jackie, and he refuses to give them more money than the movie is making mobsters look bad, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong. And I'll give it that as a compliment in general. Claire gets punched by a homeless man and gave her 3 stitches, and Claire gets tougher and tougher, and I don't really buy Elizabeth Moss as a badass turnaround, and same goes to Kathy and Ruby's actors. I don't buy their toughness whatsoever because they're just comedic actors. I'm going to just be honest with you. Melissa McCarthy can act in Can You Ever Forgive Me, the one I brought up earlier. But other than that, no. Little Jackie finds out Kathy, Claire, and Ruby are taking their money, and they talk, and Ruby antagonizes him, And they go to Helen, and this movie is too much dialogue and less action. Maybe this is a drama, and Helen tells Kathy, Claire, and Ruby to run. And that's not going to happen because this movie is predictable, except for the ending, which I'll talk about later. Claire gets attacked by little Jackie himself, and gets saved by Gabriel O'Malley, played by Domhnall Gleeson, and shows the wives how to cut a leg. And I found it funny that Kathy and Ruby run out of the room. I chuckled a little bit then. I mean, that's the only thing I laughed at. Claire and Gabriel are now a couple, and honestly, these two actors have chemistry, so I like them as a couple, but just not their characters. Despite I don't like any of the characters, and a mobster from Brooklyn named Alfonso sees the wives, and the movie is slowing way down to get the fucking point. And that is their husbands will be home in 4 months, and I wish the movie wasn't crummy enough to get to the damn point. Moving on, Ruby and Helen go to a restaurant, and Ruby kills Helen by pushing her to the stairs, and I thought, good fucking riddance. And Ruby and Kathy start getting under each other's skin, and same to me. And Detective Martinez, who's Detective Silvers' partner, gets shot, and I honestly could give a shit, but I don't. Claire and Rob get into a fight, and that made me uncomfortable. And she shoots Rob and throws him into the river, and that was a tough scene, and just horrible to watch Kevin puts a hit on the wives. And they double the money and to kill Kevin, and Kathy and Ruby really get under my skin. Kevin gets shot by Claire, who gets shot by Colin, and Gabriel shoots Colin, and that was heartbreaking that Claire dies at that point in the movie because I thought she would live at the end, and that's when the movie gets really unpredictable. Jimmy goes to Alfonso and tells him to kill Kathy as her kids get captured. And she finds out Ruby was right after she tells Kathy about her setup and Detective Silvers, which was a bullshit moment. And Kathy lets Jimmy die, and Kathy and Ruby come to an understanding in the meat store, and the movie ends like that? What a load of shit! Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.8 out of 10. This movie is predictable until the ending. These characters got under my skin, and I don't like any of these motherfucking characters, except maybe Claire and Gabriel, but that's it, because they had chemistry. Everyone else I don't really like, and honestly, this movie left me very cold by the end of the day. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I will be coming up next. I will be up with Tank Girl, as from the DC Universe, and until next time, goodbye.